Hungary and Slovakia will establish an investigative commission to examine the condition of the Druzhba oil pipeline and are requesting access to Ukrainian territory for this purpose. This was announced by Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban after speaking with his Slovak counterpart Robert Fico. Putin's friends in Europe, Orban and Fico, do not believe that the supply of Russian oil was halted due to damage to the pipeline as a result of a Kremlin attack and consider it to be a political decision by Kyiv. President Zelensky spoke with the leader of Slovakia and invited Fico to Ukraine to discuss all the problematic issues with him. Earlier, Fico had issued a threat stating that Slovakia would no longer provide Ukraine with emergency assistance until the transit of Russian oil is fully restored. At the same time, Orban blocked the 20th package of sanctions against Russia, as well as EU funding for Ukraine amounting to 90 billion euros. So how dangerous is this blackmail for Ukraine, and how can Putin's friends in Europe be neutralized? This will be covered next in the report by TSN correspondent Maria Vasilyeva.
For over a full month now, Russian oil has not been flowing to Putin's friends in Europe due to deliberate Russian military attacks on the Ukrainian pipeline system. The officials in the Kremlin have not yet explained the logic behind these Russian strikes, but the leaders of Hungary and Slovakia were very quick to come forward and accuse Ukraine, claiming that it had intentionally and purposefully stopped supplying Russian crude through the Druzhba pipeline, the very last remaining lifeline that still energetically connects Europe to Moscow.
For the first time in the history of our country, our eastern neighbor Ukraine, which is currently at war, has been blocking oil supplies through the Druzhba pipeline since January 27th. The government has carefully studied the situation and determined that there are no technical obstacles to resuming the supply. It is becoming increasingly clear that this is a case of open political blackmail.
And that is a complete lie, says President Zelensky. If Orban is deeply concerned about Russian oil, he can attempt to discuss the situation with his close ally Putin.
Russia has repeatedly and deliberately destroyed this critical pipeline several times already. And by the way, not just that one, but others as well. Brody, for example, if you've heard of that pipeline, it has also been destroyed. So let Orban talk directly to Putin, maybe even about an energy ceasefire or other similar matters. When you restore something, Russia attacks again. And as soon as a maintenance crew approaches the site to begin repairing the damage, they attack once more just to kill people. This constant cycle of violence is why the local population is suffering so much. From what? Why restore it then? For what possible purpose? To lose so many innocent people? I truly believe that is a very high price to pay.
Orban, like Fico, made no mention of the Russian attacks, but instead issued an order to halt the supply of diesel fuel to Ukraine. This poses no threat to us. Traders will simply buy more available Polish or Romanian diesel. The Slovak Prime Minister Fico introduced a similar ban and took it a step further. He announced that Bratislava would no longer provide critical emergency assistance to the Ukrainian energy system.
I am going to formally request the state company SEPS to immediately terminate the emergency supply of electricity to Ukraine. If the President of Ukraine informs our administration that we should buy gas and oil elsewhere and not from Russia, even if it is more difficult and expensive and we lose a lot of money, then we have the right to respond in a similar manner.
Ukrenergo reassured, Fico's threats will not affect the Ukrainian energy system in any way. All imports are carried out on a commercial basis, and the Slovak power grids, just like the Hungarian ones, essentially serve as a transit route for electricity that Ukraine buys from European operators, since it shares a common energy system with the EU. Therefore, any attempts to restrict this for political reasons would be very costly for Bratislava. For the same reason, Fico is even less likely to risk refusing emergency assistance if Ukraine requests it.
There are agreements, protocols, penalties, and consequences. If Ukraine initiates an investigation, it will be unavoidable. The economic and financial consequences for Slovakia will be such that they will definitely end up costing Mr. Fico much more than any actions taken by the Ukrainian side.
Slovakia and Hungary, if they wished, could easily find a replacement for Russian oil and receive it through the Croatian Adria pipeline. For example, this is what the Czech Republic did. But in that case, the oil would be about 10 to 15% more expensive. But neither Orban nor Fico wants to get off the Russian hook. Quite to the contrary, over the past 5 years, they have actually increased their imports of Russian raw materials to 90% and have deliberately refused alternative supplies, while still remaining members of the EU, which has officially announced that it will reduce purchases of Russian oil to zero as early as the end of next year. This week, the European Commission announced that the rejection of Russian oil will be enshrined in law, if such a bill is supported by the European Parliament. Prime Ministers Orban and Fico, both current and future, will have to choose between Russian energy and the benefits of European Union membership. So Putin's allies are trying to harm Ukraine wherever they possibly can. Hungary blocked the 20th package of European sanctions that Brussels had planned to announce on the anniversary of the full-scale invasion. It specifically concerns a complete ban not only on the purchase, but also on the transportation of Russian oil. Budapest is blocking the opening of clusters in the negotiations on Ukraine's accession to the EU. Due to the Hungarian veto, even the already agreed reparations loan of 90 billion euros is blocked. The president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, who arrived in Kyiv on February 24th, assured, enunciating every word clearly, that Kyiv will not be left without money and that she will find a way to bypass Orban's veto.
The significant loan was formally approved by all 27 heads of state and government within the European Council. They gave their solemn word. This word cannot be broken at all, so we will fulfill the loan conditions one way or another. Let me state this very clearly. We have various options available to us, and we will use them.
Right here in Kyiv, on February 24th, European officials finally approved this reparations loan. The money is supposed to arrive at the end of March, and this is literally a critical deadline because Ukraine only has enough of its own funds until April. Despite the fact that Orban is essentially taking away the weapons Ukraine uses to defend itself, Kyiv is demonstrating a constructive approach in the dispute, but at the same time perhaps sees in it a chance to put an end to Russian energy terror, or at least to achieve a pause in attacks on Ukraine's energy sector.
Ukrainian diplomacy made a strategically astute and clever maneuver by proposing to use the Odessa-Brody pipeline as an alternative. Most likely, at some point in the future, the flow of these vital energy supplies will eventually be restored. But it certainly won't happen very quickly. This situation will also serve as a significant element of political pressure and a complex political game, where any shelling of Ukraine's oil and gas systems, which is a calculated and intentional act of aggression by the Kremlin, could result in Kremlin-loyal governments not receiving the essential energy resources they depend on.
Viktor Orban accuses Kyiv and Brussels of conspiring against him. He claims they want to install a pro-Ukrainian government in Hungary. On April 12th, parliamentary elections are to be held in the country, and according to polls, support for Orban's party is declining. He has largely built his campaign on aggressive confrontation with an enemy he himself invented, Ukraine and Zelensky. All of this is to mobilize his supporters. He even ordered troops to be deployed near Hungarian energy facilities, supposedly to protect them from imaginary Ukrainian attacks. And cheap Russian oil is yet another trump card that Orban uses to prove his indispensability to voters. He controls not only the government in Hungary, but also has an influential faction in the European Parliament. Even Slovak Prime Minister Fico looks to him for guidance. So both Kyiv and Brussels are genuinely interested in the defeat of the influential pro-Putin Orban in the elections. If he manages to hold on to his current seat, the European Union will clearly have to return to its original Plan B and try to change the voting system in the EU, where major decisions are currently made only on the basis of unanimity. Maria Vasilieva, TSN 1+1 United News Marathon.